Emily Elizabeth, and I'm the host of the What Fulfills You podcast, a show for and about individuals always seeking to be their best selves. On this show, we talk all about building the mindset, finding the right careers, creating meaningful relationships, and so much more. Welcome to the What Fulfills You podcast. Hello everyone. Welcome back. My name is Emily Elizabeth. I'm your host, and for today's solo episode, I wanted to share some reflective thoughts on things that I've learned in and about relationships, love, and I think more or less what true love really means. And I feel somewhat passionate about this topic because I can't help but say, just observing how a lot of people date today and my generation, it's kind of gone out of hands, to be honest. And I think there's pros and cons to everything that has progressed in terms of accessibility with dating apps and all of that. But I think naturally, as we know, the downside of that is this not only lower ability to work through conflict and natural elements of a relationship, which are the downs, right? The tough parts. But I think also there is more of a tendency to see if the grass is greener on the other side. And I'll be honest, to preface, I am a old soul romantic when it comes to dating and relationships, and this didn't quite actually develop until I want to say when I was 23. And it's actually in part because of an experience I had with a guy I was dating back then. And when I use the word dating, I really mean it lightly. So dating and being in a relationship with someone is very different. But I was dating a guy for a couple months in Los Angeles, and that's when I feel like I learned a very different level of love and being understood, and how we all deserve that feeling and what that feeling feels like. And this was, I want to say, 9 months after I had gotten out of my 4-year relationship in college. And, you know, this guy was older. When I say older, he was in his 30s. I've mentioned a little bit about this guy before, but he made a tremendous impact on me in the sense of not only being more open-minded, he was definitely a catalyst for my inspiration to move to Venice, California, as well as starting my marketing agency, something that I've shared with some of my friends, but I don't know how candid I've been about that. But I'm pretty certain I've mentioned that before. But he was and is in the arts field. He's a cinematographer, and I think his work ethic, he's also, from Germany, and so he's foreign to the U.S. and just had a lot of different perspectives that really, I think, accentuated my mature side and brought out different layers in me that were always there, but were more or less kind of dormant, And while we did not ever end up being in a formal relationship, one of the key lessons I learned with this guy is that not only do I deserve someone to be upfront and honest with me, but that these types of guys do indeed exist. And later on, I actually ended up having a bias, like thinking, okay, it's mainly the older guys that will do this. And that was, of course, proven not to be the case at all times. So their age does not quite affect their ability to be upfront, honest, communicate, not ghost, right? But I don't know. At times, it usually helps, I guess, right, with life experience or whatever. But this guy, he never led me on to think that this could turn into a relationship, which, looking back, I'm so grateful that he was just super honest in the process. We texted every day for, I want to say exactly 2 months. We texted every single day, and it was awesome. We also, of course, went on a handful of dates and so forth. But by the end of the 2 months, he ended up having to go back. I think entertainment was opening up. Things were starting to film again, and he had to leave Los Angeles to Austin, Texas to film the show. And that was, I think, also the catalyst for him to really send me a long message saying how, the timing isn't right and all of these different things, and just was acknowledging, hey, like, this is not going to go in any direction like that, but I deeply enjoy spending time with you and all that. And it was a very mature message, and something I just heavily valued moving forward as my dating life progressed, because I learned that, not only is that the most respectful way to go about dating and respecting someone else's time and feelings, but like I said earlier, those guys exist. You don't have to deal with someone that would ghost you. You don't have to deal with someone that's kind of hot and cold and whatever. And I want to also add that when I was 23 at this age, I was definitely really, really bummed about, things not progressing with this guy. And ultimately, do I think we would have been the best long-term fit? I can't say that with certainty, but I will say that we had elements in our dynamic that enabled us to really understand each other well. And I know that it was really great to also feel understood on a deeper level. And for him, it was probably in part of knowing and meeting a lot of women throughout his years. And so when you meet someone like myself, I feel like at that age, not saying this in a pretentious way at all, but I really feel like I had progressed in a maturity level beyond 23 at that stage in my life. And so I feel like he had recognized that, and he was very curious about what I was doing and what I was building, my business, my podcast. He was always super curious and very warm about it and very encouraging about it. Would talk about different books that, I already read, and books that he would recommend. And so for me, that was so profound, because when you experience that at a younger age, you start to set the bar higher in a positive way. You recognize, like, all right, I'm not going to settle for someone that doesn't understand me, like, at the very least, like this, right? So that's one thing I would say as kind of like my own story, which is there are there are real men out there. There are men that will be honest with you, would respect your time, will tell you if they see this going somewhere. Will also tell you, if they don't. And if you get mixed signals, take it for what it is. And so luckily, I was able to move forward without having to think about or question when bullshit would come up. With a guy, if that were the case, I just would be like, nope, that's like, I'm not going to fall for that again. And so fast forward, that was 2020. 2021 rolls around. This is me just basically going back step by step in the years. And so right around, shortly before I turned 24, I also ended up dating another guy. He was in New York, I was in LA at the time, and We more or less kind of very lightly dated for a span of 5 months. And once again, it was great. It kind of goes in line with the question I have in my card game, which is, what are the most important things you look for in a partner? And the list goes lifestyle compatibility, emotional chemistry, intellectual compatibility, and physical chemistry. It might be worded slightly different, but I realized for me, of course, all four, right? That's ultimately what you have. But if you had to rank them in order, I think for me, lifestyle compatibility is probably number one. And then number two, the emotional chemistry compatibility. I think that's my top two. And, with this guy, it was primarily intellectual and emotional, and I guess you could say a little bit of physical, but the lifestyle compatibility was just not there. And I remember I caught myself, by the time I moved to New York, I wanted to reach out to him and see him again, because I just moved to New York, right? I remember telling a friend back then, I was like, it's probably not the right move. You know why? It's as much as he's a great guy, great person, treated me well, just all around great person, but I knew it just was not a long-term fit. And so for me, I would ask myself, why would you go and entertain something like that knowing it's not a long-term fit, even though I wasn't even looking for something serious? As you get older and wiser, and I was 24 at the time, I'm like, why would you go do something that you kind of maybe just emotionally you feel like you want to do it, but logically you know that it doesn't make sense? So obviously didn't hang out with him anymore, and then that just faded out. And so then a couple months later, I ended up meeting and dating my second boyfriend. And so that one was actually turned into a formal relationship. And a few different profound things I learned in this experience, and I think probably is like the cherry on top of multiple things. I think number one, to me, it really solidified the ideas and conversations I've heard from other people talking about how when you have something with someone, you just know. And I know some people disagree in the sense of, you gotta feel it out, you gotta go on a second or third date. Sure. But what I mean is, you will know after the first encounter if this is someone you want to see again. You will just know. You won't have to be like, should I go on the second date? And I say that thinking of all the girls I've heard always talk about, should I go on that second or third date? They're asking around if they should, when deep down inside they know they kind of don't feel like it. But what? They maybe like the idea of being taken out. They love the attention. I'm sorry, I'm just being transparent, right? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but to acknowledge the truth about it is important for oneself. And so, with my last partner, my second boyfriend, it was instant. I've shared this on a Raw Talk before. I think it was Raw Talk with Caroline, the very first one back in 2023. That was instant. We connected like snap of a finger since night one. I met him actually New Year's Eve through mutual friends at their gathering. And I remember writing down in my journal the same weekend that I'd met him, I said something about how just it felt like a soul that I knew before. Something I've never written down before. I also wrote about how he reminded me of the German cinematographer. This is so funny because I feel like I'm being extremely candid and open with you guys, but this is in a way refreshing and easy for me to say. And obviously looking back, right, I'm very detached from everything now, but I actually had written down that this guy who's my second boyfriend, it reminded me of the guy that I said earlier back in 2020 was like the first time I really experienced some deep understanding, like someone that deeply understood me. Felt the same exact thing with this guy, the second boyfriend. One of those things where you just did not have to think. There was no thinking to it. It was all just there, just present, just being. And I never experienced something like that before. It was actually that relationship that led me to tapping into mindfulness and reading Thich Nhat Hanh's books. And most importantly, through reading his books, it really highlighted to me where true love comes from and where it stems from. And this is, I think, where a lot of people are tricky today, because true love is being able to really understand someone. And when you understand someone, you have compassion for them. And when you have compassion for someone, you naturally have patience or things of that sort. And so, obviously, while me and this guy, we did not end up, continuing our relationship, I saw what it lit up inside me. It lit up this soul-based feeling of love. I was extremely patient and understanding in the process of dating this person, and it was complicated because of just life circumstances, to be honest, and the complexities of it. I mean, he had immigrated to the U.S. from Russia. I want to say at the time we met, like 6 years prior. And so, his life being an immigrant and having immigrated in his late 20s, he was just getting his footing in a way, And look, I came from an immigrant family myself. I mean, my parents immigrated here, so I had a lot of empathy for that. I had no issue with where he was at in his life. I just, knew that progress is just the most important. But in the end, it was just too difficult for him to deal with that. And I think also just had different ways of dealing with things. That was also when I learned about attachment styles. And I actually ended up reading the book Attached, which I would highly recommend for those of you who are unaware about attachment styles. It can really help clear up why you do certain things. And so he was more avoidant and fearful avoidant, if I had to speculate. And I was probably at that time anxious leaning. And if anything, I'm always dabbling between anxious leaning and secure, right? Maybe it depends on the day. But hey, at least I can acknowledge it. I'm very self-aware and really try to practice on improving in my life, right? And so I know a lot of people, whether it was through telling me this or just what I knew they thought this, a lot of people would have, just said, all right, this guy is during periods of avoidant withdrawals, which is what avoidants tend to do, right? A lot of people would naturally say, give up on this person, blah, blah, blah. And that's where I saw the feeling of true love come out, because when you love someone, like I said earlier, what I've learned from Thich Nhat Hanh is you understand why things are a certain way. And I'm not going to explain it in the best way, because some of you guys might think like, oh, you don't want to be a pushover or whatever the fuck, right? But truly, when I say understand, it's also saying that you understand why someone's suffering, and you understand why. So it's the same thing as saying, like, I understand why my partner is anxious, or I understand why my partner is avoidant. I understand why they're withdrawing, and so of course there are levels to what you tolerate, right? But the deepest form of love I've learned is very much having the patience to be the rock when someone needs it. you know? And sometimes that looks like showing up in a patient, compassionate way. And that's one of the biggest takeaways I had in this second relationship, which is if you truly love someone, like to your core, not only is it unconditional, for sure, unconditional, right? Meaning you love them regardless of circumstances, what they give you in return, like all that bullshit that I feel like modern society talks about today. You love them because you do. You just love them. And that experience really highlighted that for me. And so I think since then, I started taking love and romance a lot more seriously, in the sense of, I've always been like this, but I think that made me recognize even more how I will know if I truly love someone. And not only that, I would never want to say that to someone and not actually mean it. Mean it in like the soul. You'll feel it when you really deeply love someone. That's why I remember actually during that relationship, I would ask my friends. I'd be like, how many times have you been in love? Or how many times have you truly loved someone? And it would get them thinking. It would really get them thinking. And in most cases, they would say 1 or 2 at most. And like, that's, that's saying like, okay, 2 people and they dated and were in relationships with like 4 people before, for example. So, it gets you thinking. It gets you thinking of what does that really mean, right? Ask yourself, if this person didn't do A, B, and C, would I still love them? I'm very adamant as well. This is where like I'm the old school romantic, where it doesn't matter where, at least for me, I date guys, so it doesn't matter where the guy is in his life and what he can do for me and give me and all that good stuff. I said it before and I'll say it again. If a man wants to treat you like a princess, and whatever that looks like, whether it's through external things or just things that are more relationship skill based, whatever that looks like, his resources don't make any difference except the levels of what he can do. So at one point in his life, he might not have had much. Another point in his life, he has more. He will always remain the same. And if you don't believe me, I've seen it firsthand as well. I've seen guys that are multimillionaires, and I'm talking multimillionaires that sold their company to P&G, Procter & Gamble. I have seen them be very, very cautious with how they gift things to their girlfriend or whether they should even spend that money on her. And it's just a thing, you guys. Like, some guys love to be able to treat their woman in a certain way, and some just are more hesitant and it's not natural to them. And so, what I care for more is kind of like the old days in the village, right? If you lived in the village, someone's got to go hunt, right? Just an analogy, you guys. So for me, I look for a partner that has the skill to go hunt and to go hunting again, okay? Because there are going to be ups and downs in life. Some people, like during the pandemic, they'll lose their job or their business will go to zero, right? Will you stick it through with them, right? Or can you trust that they can get through that, right? They have the skill to get through that. That's what I would pay attention to more. And that's, for me, naturally, that's what I do pay attention to more. I think the beauty of also my dating experiences is a sense of peace and safety, something that I didn't realize was not as, I don't know, necessarily totally common with some other people, because I've dated people that have had just unfortunate experiences in their past, whether they cheated or they were cheated on or both. And look, it happens, but it's dark, right? It's I'm not saying that I'm perfect, 'cause I'm not. There are other things that I certainly do and act and, whatever, my childish ways in relationships. But I mean, like, loyalty to me, and maybe it's also like a cultural thing, it's just like, that's not even a question, which is why I've only ever been in a total of 3 relationships at this age, and some people have dated more, been in more relationships. I just have always been, if I know I'm gonna be still interested in other guys, I would not commit to you. I would not claim my girlfriend title. It's not that hard for me to be like, nope, just gonna keep being myself and single, And so it was amazing to date someone, my last partner. He was extremely loyal, and that definitely came from a cultural perspective too. I think just him being born in Soviet Union society and just what that looked like growing up, it's different. Their sense of loyalty is different, as he would share, but also just that sense of peace, like to be able to, we saw each other once a week, and never having thoughts about him. Like, it was just natural. Those thoughts never ever occurred. And that's the same with my very first relationship as well. When I was in college, those thoughts never ever occurred. I mean, I'm just like fascinated thinking back, how blessed I've been to have dated people that not only set the bar high in that regard, but like taught me the beauty, the relevance, the importance of being loyal in a relationship. And that's just not a question, And I look back and I think about also the friends I'm surrounded by, especially my very, very close ones. Loyalty in a relationship is just natural. It's just to their core. And I know some of you guys have different experiences with that in your own relationships and past. But that's why I share this, because, I think it's important to realize that there are men out there, there are people out there that share the same value as you. If you are someone that maybe it's, partially religious reasons, or just you're part of your core values, or you grew up with parents that just were so absurdly loyal to each other, and you also want something like that as well, just know that it does exist out there. It does. But you also have to ask the right questions. You do. And it's one of those things, it's just you feel the sense of peace and security and safety with that person. And I've been very fortunate to have always had that experience with previous partners. And even, like guys that I've dated, even briefly, I just know, like, there's a level of secure communication that just was so profound that I look back truly at this age and I'm like, damn, like, this one made me feel very safe and secure and just was amazing. It was just awesome, So, like, don't listen to the people that are like, oh, like complaining about these guys and this and that. It is all about which rooms you are in. I think the last thing I will leave this bonus episode with, when it comes to my reflection on what I've learned in love and relationships, I learned this at a young age, and I will repeat this again. And I'm glad that I learned this at a young age, but men will move mountains to be with the woman that they want to be with. I have subscribed to that belief all these years, and I still do. And so in the early days of dating, I've always been adamant about, I have no problem showing a guy that I'm interested, showing reciprocation, taking a little bit of initiative. But I know at the end of the day, if he wants to be with me, he will be with me. He will find a way. And for me, that's given me peace as well, when I was dating and in the early days with just talking to new people. I was never worried about whether they would like me because I knew that it would answer itself. It would show for itself. And so that goes the same for you as a listener. You don't have to wonder. You don't have to be like, oh, I just don't get like what it was or whatever. You don't have to. Okay? It doesn't matter, because if there's something there, if there's something profound there, if he wants to be with you, you will know. And it's okay to show initiative, something I've done in my own experiences too. Show initiative, show interest, but make sure that you really feel that from that potential partner. And no, I'm really glad that I learned that early on, because that's actually, I think, besides the difference in life visions, that's probably why I parted ways in my college relationship, because I just think that he didn't have, understanding the legwork of showing up as a partner. And I knew I wanted more. I wanted someone that just didn't let it slip so easily. And so I hope these little stories, personal shares, are helpful for you guys. I know that this is just my way of giving back to when I was listening to podcasts as well over the years, and giving back to giving back on the knowledge that I've learned from women that are a couple years older than me. And so now I'm just sharing it again with you guys, and through my own personal experiences and lessons and takeaways. So thank you for tuning in to today's bonus episode. If you are curious about the card game that I briefly mentioned, it's the best-selling card game. You can find it at whatfulfillsyou.com. It is great for personal growth, journal prompts, and even date night. And that is all for today's episode. I will chat with you guys in the next one.